What's going on, guys? Today I'm going to talk to you about the QC process, which is a 7-step process that will teach you pretty much how to deliver a damn near perfect QC. I like QCs because they prevent customers from being our QC agent. So if we don't have a QC process, we're basically telling the customer, please be our QC guy or girl. And then you're in trouble because they're probably not going to come back if they're your QC person, and it's not good. So the perfect QC for me is a 7-step process. Let's get right into it. Number one, I love this because you have to understand why we're doing things. The QC is really cool because it's a double-edged sword. If you do a great QC, your shop is great. If you do a bad QC or no QC, what happens is the person doing your QC is really the end deliverer of the product. So if that person does a terrible job, you could have incredible technicians with incredible tools, with incredible diagnostic skills, with incredible front counter salespeople and parts people and managers and ownership, and the end guy drops the ball. We all look like idiots. The entire organization, the entire wrench, 55 something people all look like idiots because the last person does not do a proper QC. That is why the QC is so crucial, that you get it nailed down. And I'll tell you something else. You could have bad technicians, but if you have an incredible QC process, you can pretty much save the show, right? And the same thing goes for, I've always said it, fixing cars right is non-negotiable. That's the business we're in. You could have an incredible lobby. You could have incredible salespeople. Like I said, if all that is great, but if the QC process is bad, that's like, again, going to a restaurant that's incredible, smells great, everyone looks good, the decor is great, and then they put a turd on your plate. And you're like, what do you mean you're going to give me a turd? So don't deliver a turd. That's why the QC process is important. And all our reputation and trust is in the hands of the QC process person. So I hope I said that well. All right, the actual QC. Step one, find out what the customer's concern was. This is so important. You got to find out what the heck even the customer came in for. So you got to find out what it is, and you got to really find out what they replaced to do it. So an example of that would be customer had a brake squeak, and we replaced the front brakes. That's it. Customer had a misfire and a check engine light. We replaced spark plugs and coils. That's it. Customer had a coolant leak. We replaced the water pump. You got to know what you're getting into. Get the clipboard and find out what we did. Look at the tech metric. Really look over what we did. Number two, that should only take you about a minute, by the way. Replicate the concern. So your job is now to act like the customer who just paid this $2,000 bill. Pretend literally, oh my God, this is a $2,000 bill that I am about to pay. So if I'm a good QC guy or girl, I'm going to look at the bill as if I'm about to pay this bill. So I'm going to drive that car. Now, my rule for test driving is very simple. Before we get to the test drive, I want to replicate the concern, and I will tell you that you got to drive, for every hour of labor, you should drive 1 mile. So if it's a 10-hour job, you got to drive 10 miles. And your job is to make sure you replicate that concern in those 10 miles. Once you've driven the car and you can't find the issue, then make sure that you write down, this is how many miles I drove it. This is all I did to replicate it. Drove 10 miles, went fast, went slow, could not hear squeaks. Sign. Now you confirm that the customer is getting their money's worth. Very important, guys. Step 3 and 4, I cannot emphasize. This is the bread and butter. Everything has a core and a heart, and this is the heart of the QC process, is to replicate and the concern. And if you can't find it, confirm that you could not replicate it. And you do that however long it takes you. And if you're even a little bit of a shadow of a doubt in your mind, please do not move forward. Return the car and be like, I hear a slight thing. I don't like being anal, but if I'm a QC guy or if you're a QC person, I'm going to tell you to be very anal about the QC. Guys, I hope I said that well. Again, everything has a heart, and the heart of the QC process is step 3 and step 4, which is to replicate the concern and then confirm that you could not find it. After that is done, you can move on to the 5th part, which is noting any additional issues. And in this case, pay attention to everything. If you hear any additional squeaks, if any lights come on, if you see any body damage, take photos of everything, please. That's the easiest way. Other than a squeak, you can make a note about, and take photos of the body damage, take photos of the dash lights that come on, take photos of everything if you can. If you see any leaks, put the car on the lift. By the way, confirm, again, you did that, make any notes, write great notes in there. And number six, final inspection and presentation. So this is where I would tell you that cleaning is number 6, right? Cleaning for me is a huge part of QC and delivering the final product to our customer. I want you to focus on finding where the work was done and clean that area first. So if brakes were done, make sure that the wheels are clean, make sure that everything's tight in there if you're going to be under the car. But make sure if we did something under the engine bay, make sure the fluids are topped off, make sure they didn't leave any tools behind, make sure there's no grease marks on their hood or their fenders. Start always with the area worked. If you're going to clean, start there and then move on to doing the mini clean and vacuuming and whatnot. If it's a $2,000 or more job, please take it through the car wash. The car should always leave cleaner than when it first came in. There should be no grease marks anywhere, especially, and guys, I'm going to point this out, especially on the steering wheel and on the shifter. It kills me. And I've taken my car to our stores, and I always feel grease on my steering wheel. Matter of fact, this happens more times than not. This is huge, guys. You cannot leave steering wheel grease. You cannot do that, especially after I had my car detailed the last time I was in. And I'm telling you that. Right? And you're like, oh, it's Zane's car, and you're being careful, and you still left grease marks on the freaking steering wheel. And I took a napkin and I rubbed it on the steering, and it was all black. And I said, look, I just had my car detailed. That is actually disgraceful because, again, the customer will never see the actual repair. All they see is grease, and all that they see is incompetence. So, guys, that's a huge part of it, especially where the customer is sitting. That area has to be clean, number two. And then number one, of course, the work that was done, make sure that area is clean. If there was an oil leak or a coolant leak that was repaired, please put the car on the lift, get under the car, and make sure it's not leaking anymore. If the technician, which they shouldn't have, left a lot of residue behind, power wash it. Clean it all up, let it sit, and then pull it back in to make sure that it is actually not leaking anymore. You guys remember, if you don't do this, the customer will. They'll come back a week later. And the thing that customers hate, second most after not communication, is comebacks. Right? Time is very valuable for people. Every time the customer comes back, they're losing another day's worth of work, and they hate you a lot more. Finally, when all this is done, steps 1 through 6 is done, park the car in the front of the shop, right where the lobby is, back it in so that the nose is pointing out. That's when we know the car is done and ready to be delivered, and bring the keys up front and put it in the done section of the board. That is it. Guys, once again, it's a 7-step process. Number 1, you got to know why, because if you don't do it, the customer will, and they're not going to like you if they're your QC person. Number 2, find the concern and find out what was repaired. Number 3, replicate the concern and drive 1 mile for every hour of labor. Number 4, confirm that you could not replicate the concern. Sign off on it and talk about what you did to find the concern. Number 5, notate for any additional issues, like I said, body damage, lights, etc., noises. Number 6, clean the area that you worked in and the area that the customer will be sitting, and car wash it over big tickets for $2,000 or more. And number 7, park it nose out in the front of the shop. I hope this video was helpful, guys. If you do this, you will have badass QCs. And if you have badass QCs, you will have badass customer retention. If you have badass customer retention, you will have a badass store that continues to grow to infinity. You will dominate your market and make a crap ton of money and have your customers that love you and love doing business with you. I hope this was helpful. Thank you very much. See you on the next one.